Hello, welcome to my channel. I'm Tiffany, a retired librarian turned homeschool mom, and this is our last video of 2024, being shot on 12/8 of 2024. So let's get into it. So, as I have already done, let's remove that. Yes, this is a library copy. I should probably buy more, most of these. But we are going to be going to be reviewing an episode of Agath Christie's, I'm going to butcher this name, Poirot. And no, he's not French, he's Belgian. This is The Mysterious Affair. And I always want to put the in here. It's The Mysterious Affair at Styles. I always want to put it at the Styles. And Styles refers to the country home of the family where the murder takes place. Now, I already covered the book. What I found odd about this episode is it is listed in IMDb as episode 1 of season 3. Why this is odd is because Mysterious Affair at Styles was Agatha Christie's first novel, and it's the first time you are introduced to Hercule Poirot and what is now Lieutenant Hastings. Those are her two main detective and detective assistant. So the fact that it is shown as in the 3rd season seems a little odd, because again, this is the literal first story. But let us get into this. Now, the character you are staring at is what I think of when I hear about Poirot. And I'm probably, yes, butchering this. Again, I don't speak Belgian or French. At least very, very bad French. I can say a few things in French. It was a long time ago. I speak better Romanian. Not. But that is another Romance language. But nonetheless, this is what I watched with my mother, which is probably the reason I should buy the series, at least in pieces. So this is the face I think of when I think of this detective. And this is the actor. I'll bring up the IMDb page here. Bring it out. So, David, I'm really going to butcher his last name. Suchet. He's British. But he was literally in this series, ran for years. This is I'm just looking at, I think there's like 8 seasons of this. So this one specifically aired on September 16th, 1990. So, and it's about an hour and 43 minutes long. So I probably did see this when it aired. It seriously would not have surprised me. It's just I would have been a very little kid and it would have gone over my head, because I used to lay in bed with my mother when she would watch Masterpiece Theater on PBS, which is where this would have aired back then, at least where I was in Hawaii. So I've already reviewed the books. You can check that out. So this is done really well. So in this story, you have it starts off with Lieutenant Hastings. It is 1914, so this is during World War I. He's at a convalescent home, so for soldiers, and he's just watching a newsreel from the front, which is where he was. And somebody comes in to see him, and it's his old friend, John. I'm trying to get I'll have to bring up the IMDb page to get the John Cavendish, and who's an old friend. So he asks Hastings, Lieutenant Hastings, to come and join him at his mother's, in place his stepmother's, but she's pretty much raised him and his brother. So she is his mother, as he refers to her, at their country home, which is Styles. Now, he also talks about how his mother, who had been widowed for a very, very long time, marries a man by the name of Alfred Inglethorpe, who's apparently 20 years his younger. So he is there with his wife, Mary Cavendish, and his brother. His name is John, and his brother's name is Lawrence. So he's the cast of characters, besides, of course, Poirot. You have Lieutenant Hastings, you have Mary Cavendish and John Cavendish, which are, John Cavendish is the older son, so he's set to inherit Styles. So, and then you have our murder victim, which is Mrs. Inglethorpe, her second husband, Alfred Inglethorpe, her best friend, Evie Howard, Lawrence Cavendish, which is the younger son, Cynthia Murdoch, who is a daughter of a childhood friend of Mrs. Inglethorpe, who she's taking on. She's working as a nurse during the war. Dorcas, which is the name of their maid. And I think, is there one more? I think those are all the people that are currently living at the house. So that is our cast of characters. So Hastings arrives, quiet country home, though from what I can gather, they're not that far outside of London. So he comes, he meets the family, and when he's in town one day, he runs in. You also see Poirot, who's walking around with a bunch of other Belgians. They are in England, basically as refugees from Belgium because the war is going on, and he's a former chief inspector. So obviously the war is coming on, and he's gotten out of town. And former Mrs. Cavendish, now Mrs. what on earth? Inglethorpe, there we go, has provided them a home in the village, because obviously she owns the manor house and probably a decent amount of the village, because that's just the way things, again, this is still the time of the aristocracy during World War I in England. So the lords and ladies, dukes and duchesses, have a tendency to own a decent amount of land and most of the villages, because that near their properties, because that's just the way it was. It's not that way anymore, but nonetheless, this is World War I am tired. It is 7:30. My child does not sleep well. I do not get a lot of sleep. So, that is not because this is boring. I do actually really did, in fact, enjoy this. So there's our cast of characters. So Hastings happens to run into Poirot, finds out that he's staying in the village, and shortly thereafter, you definitely see the tension, because John Cavendish does not like his stepfather at all. And in fact, Evie, Mrs. Inglethorpe's best friend, leaves. She gets in a fight with Mrs. Inglethorpe, tells her it's like he's after your money, he's 20 years younger than you, and then she proceeds to stomp out. Sorry. Again, I'm a mom. And it's December. So she leaves. Shortly, and of course, to a description of Mr. Inglethorpe, and this is true to the book, he has a long beard and a mustache. He looks, I hate to say this, but he looks like a Jewish man in Fiddler on the Roof, minus the curly growing out sideburns, which I don't know the name of. But that is what he resembles to me, because he has the mustache and the black beard. He very much stands out amongst the much more clean-shaven other gentlemen, and even Poirot, who has the mustache, but he doesn't have anything else. So Alfred Inglethorpe stands out like a sore thumb at this house, and they do not like him because, again, he's 20 years younger, and Mrs. Inglethorpe, they met very shortly, they got married very quickly, and they think he's a gold digger. So shortly thereafter, they wake up in the middle of the night, she's having a fit. She earlier that day, she's heard arguing by both her maid, Dorcas, who's an elderly maid who's probably been with the family since she was young, and as the things go, and then by Cynthia, who's sitting outside. They do not know who she's arguing with. They assume that it's Alfred. They think it's Alfred that she's arguing with. It's behind closed doors, which is what's in her office. And she says something to the effect of something has to do with an affair, and basically something between a man and a woman that will ruin the reputation. And so then she's upset later in the day. She doesn't want to eat. She takes her tea in her room. She's asking for things to be sent by the post. So essentially something is going on. She wakes up in the middle of the night, starts having fits. They have to kind of get through the door. Cynthia's bedroom is next door. And then she proceeds pretty much to die, and they assume it's cyanide poisoning. So, and that is when Hastings asks John Cavendish, like, can I bring in Poirot to keep this quiet? At least so we can have an investigation. So, going against his brother Lawrence's wishes, John says, go ahead. Hastings brings in Poirot. Poirot examines the room. He locks her letter case. Then he goes and talks to different people. When the lawyer arrives, they go to open the case, and it's been broken open. There was a letter in there because Dorcas saw her holding something. And now in the book, one of them they leave out is, yes, she writes a will, but Poirot figures this out not because he finds a piece of paper in the necessarily just in the fireplace, but because he notices footprints, and that the will that she had changed was then burned, was notarized by the gardeners who were outside. That is cut completely. They notice it. They realize it's a will just by the type of paper she used. So, and of course, Poirot realizes this because it's summer, and why the heck would she light a fire? Because it's not for war, this effort to destroy something. So, at first, there's an inquiry, they do an autopsy, they say she was in fact killed by cyanide. But cyanide normally works very quickly. So it's like, what is going on here? So at first, they're accusing John Inglethorpe. Evie comes back. She can't stand Alfred. Everybody is looking to Alfred. He's the one who would most benefit from this because he's getting all her money. So, but of course, him being accused would also benefit John, because previously, before she got married, everything went to John Cavendish. Now it's just the home. So all the money is going to the husband. So, however, and this I believe is a difference. In the books, Alfred does in fact go on trial and it falls flat because I think they're able to find the alibi. In this, Poirot presents the alibi of where the heck he's at. So they don't end up arresting him. They do, however, end up arresting John, which is what they also do in the books. So they're assuming that he killed his stepmother for something, because they also assume that he's having an affair with one of the neighboring women because he's been seen with her. And of course she gets, and Poirot cannot figure this out. So you see him with Hastings in the family's London home. I can't remember if they went to London or they just went to the local town to deal with this. But I don't remember where they went in the books. But again, in this, Poirot is trying to figure out he's missing something. And he doesn't like it. So he's building a house of cards. And Hastings happens to mention, it's like, I rarely see your hands shake except for when you were rearranging the items on the mantelpiece. And something strikes in Poirot's mind. He goes running out of the house and goes back to Styles and gets into the house. And everybody's upset. Dorcas hands him the keys because they like John Cavendish. I mean, particularly Dorcas, she would have known him since he was a baby. So, and then basically the next thing you go to is you have Cynthia and Hastings waiting for Poirot to come back because he's summoned everybody, including one of the police detectives who was part of arresting John, who was part of Scotland Yard. And in this world, they'd interacted before. So Poirot and Hastings already know him. So eventually Poirot arrives, then Alfred arrives, and you have the big reveal, which is typical of these, both the stories and the recreations of them. So Alfred is the murderer, but he's doing it along with Evie. That's the thing, is Evie dresses up and buys the cyanide. She's dressed up and disguised as Alfred. And Hastings asks, like, why on earth did he give himself up? He says, and it has to do with the double jeopardy laws, which you find both in the United Kingdom and in the US, where you cannot be tried for the exact same crime twice if you were found innocent. So Alfred would have gone on trial, he would have been found not guilty, and they could not have tried, he was free, even though he did it. Even if they did eventually discover that him and Evie were involved in doing this, they couldn't do anything because he'd already been found innocent. So he was going to let himself go to trial, and he would have presented his evidence. So that is the way it goes in the show. I can't remember if that's the way it goes, because obviously they do an inquiry. I don't know if they started a trial with him or they're just questioning him at the station, because in the television film episode there, they questioned him in a house, and it's a very interesting scene because Alfred is standing up on the landing of the staircase. So he's in this like grand hall. So he's like way up here. And then you have the police officers, Hastings and Poirot, who are down here. So he's very much situated high above them, and he refuses to say anything. And Poirot comes in with this list. And I'm guessing he was in the bar, because that's where Poirot's, the public house, as they call it. The pub, as they're now called now. So, but which is short for public house. Where Poirot's compatriots have been getting beer. Of course, Poirot will not touch English beer. Now, of course, realize I'm sure he does because he's English. But in this, he's Belgian. So, but nonetheless, that's how he explains it. Why on earth Alfred was going to give himself up, basically, and allowed himself to be accused, is so he could get off. And he is having an affair with Evie. Her hating him is an act. She was the one who bought the cyanide. The cyanide was mixed in her tonic, and her tonic contained the chemical bromide. And when cyanide and bromide are mixed together, the cyanide will sink down to the bottom. And so when she takes the last dose, she gets the full effect of a whole heck of a bunch of cyanide rather than something it would already be in there in smaller doses. I have no idea anymore if they would be using cyanide, but again, it's 1914. So, medical science is really in its, still very much in particularly pharmaceuticals are in their infancy at this time. So, so it is discovered, they are arrested. And then there's a whole thing. And this, I believe, is different because in the books, this has to do with Cynthia and Lawrence. And they reveal to her that Lawrence is in love with them. In the TV show, there is no indicating whatsoever besides the fact that Lawrence was the one who ground up the coffee cup that was found in the room, because he assumed that Cynthia had accidentally poisoned his mother. And that's the reason, of course, throughout this, he's trying to claim that it was natural causes, because he's in love with her. He is a doctor, but he's trying to be a poet. And I don't think in the book, he might still be trying to be a poet, but in the film, he's being forced to actually act as a doctor because it's the wartime. So it's like, you have a medical degree. We need you. Go work for the war effort. No, you do not have a choice. So, because again, it's World War I, or the Great War, as they would have been calling it at that time, because it's 1914. And it's early on in the war at that. Remember, the war goes for another 4 years. The U.S. doesn't get into it until 16 or 17. I can't remember which. But nonetheless. So, but in the end of the episode, basically they're getting engaged. It kind of comes out of left field. Poirot explains it better in the books. Now he's convinced. It's like, yeah, he's protecting her like crazy. He's in love with her, and they're engaged, and that's pretty much the end of the episode. It's very true to the story. Obviously they changed a few minor things, probably to fit the flow and what they had available. I enjoy these. I'm trying to think what age. Because again, there's nothing gruesome in here that's going on. You don't see anything. Yes, you see her in the shadows shaking, and then you briefly see her that she's died. But it's not good and detailed. So again, I was watching these. I'm not sure I was understanding them with my mother at night when I was, again, this came out in 1990, so I may have been like 6. Let me see. Let's see. 5. I've been about 5. So 5 or 6. So, and I probably would have watched reruns with these. But I'm going to say late elementary at the youngest if they're interested. I'm not sure how interested this would be, because again, typical like Sherlock Holmes, you cannot follow along with the mystery in these. And they're not designed like that. Neither if the shows are staying true to the books, you can't. And it's not designed that way. These were designed as serials, so they were basically, you get a chapter a week in a magazine. And I do believe, I'm not sure if this is the way that worked either, but it may have. And that's very how these worked anyway. You were supposed to be kept in suspense until the end. So why these are mysteries in that sense, they're detective stories rather, and they're telling the story of the detective as well as of the murder mystery, but it's not the type that you can follow along with. So no, I reviewed a children's book on this. I haven't reviewed the actual book. I have actually read the actual book, but the children's book works just as well. So it sticks to the basic plot points and beats of the story. So, but nonetheless, I enjoy these. They mean a lot to me because of my mother. If you're really going to get an interest, if you have a kid who's interested in mysteries, I'm going to say no younger than 10. Just because I think anything younger than that, they're not going to really understand it. And they may not enjoy it. These things are not fast-paced. They were originally, again, shown on PBS, at least where I was. This is Acorn TV, or Acorn Media, which is now where you will be able to find these as well. So that is it for this review and the end of our December mysteries. We will come back here again for more mysteries next December, because I am in honor of my mother doing mysteries in December. The rest of the year we are covering fairy tales, so we are going to be jumping into the Snow Queen next month with Frozen and the actual Snow Queen and things that are connected to the Snow Queen in Frozen 2, and I think one of Olaf's stories. And then we'll be going into the Lion King, because I already covered for Black History Month, and African fairy tales, because I already covered The Princess and the Frog. I have opinions. You can check out that video. So I'm going to go cover various things of the Lion King, which makes me means I get to be tortured in watching the live action. I own the other one. I don't think I'm going to buy the live action. I'll just borrow it from the library. And then we'll check in with Merida and Mulan and Moana, and Ariel's going to be coming in April. So, which has me watching the live actions of those as well. So if you want to escape with me into fairy tales, please join me in 2025. And we will get back to mysteries come next December. You can watch. I've covered all sorts of other stuff in the meantime, so including Cinderella and Beauty and the Beast. I will be going back to Cinderella this year, because there's a lot of Cinderella. There just is. So, but thank you, and I hope to see you next time.